Mic test. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, David.
Awesome. How's it going?
Good. Oh,
Two different Davids or the same David?
two different David.
All right, just making sure.
This is just David.
All right. How's it going? How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Awesome. All right. Any questions?
A million.
I'll do my best I can to answer.
All right.
What's going on?
How should we start?
Do you have video? Do you have video chat? Do you have access to video?
I do have access to video.
Awesome. So I can see your frame. What are the questions you got in mind?
Oh, yeah, I don't have the frame or anything. It's in another room. I guess I just I'm very new to this, so apologize to everyone if but I've got it mostly I received the M2 in the mail the other day, put it all together. I may have some additional maybe tweaking configuration to do with the measurements and calibrating it.
Okay.
I have a little bit of an IT background, so I've been muddling through. I've been using Adobe Illustrator for basic. I'm going to start with a square. So again, sorry for being very green to this, but starting with a square, making that, and then I put it. Then what I do is I use Adobe Illustrator. I put that into Inkscape. Tell me if this is right or wrong, and then from Inkscape I can create a G code from Inkscape, and then import that job into Makerverse, right?
Yes and no, not really. Inkspace does not make the G code.
No.
It's
Okay.
easy. It's Easel that makes your Z code. So what you want to do with Illustrator, if you use Illustrator, you want to make it an SVG. You want to, before you export it, you want to make sure you go to, I believe it's Object and Expand. Okay.
Okay.
It makes paths for you, and you want to make sure that each path, say for instance, you want to have different objects in different layers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That way, when you bring it to Easel knows exactly that it breaks it down for you, so your SVG has different paths so you can pick. Okay.
Okay.
So basically, what you do, because Inkspace is basically the same thing as Illustrator.
Okay. Okay.
So it does the same thing. It's a vector program. Inkspace is a vector program, just the way Illustrator is.
Okay.
And so then you have to bring that SVG into Easel, and in Easel you have to configure everything. Your size of plywood, what size of plywood you're using, what bit you're using, your feeds and speeds. Any CNC, all CNCs need to know exactly what you're putting on there and what bit you're using.
Okay. And the depth of the board that you're cutting, etc.
Exactly, and all that is kind of self-explanatory. There's different software. There's Easel, there's Carbide Create, there's Fusion 360, there's Aspire. Depends on what you want, and your budget as well.
Sure. And then Easel, would you be able to make like the tabs? If you're cutting out an object, you can put
that
tabs.
Is correct.
Okay. And then there's really not much manipulation within the Makerverse. Again, I'm new, but there's not all that is done. The preparation for the job is done in Easel. Then you import that into Makerverse, and then really you should just hit play at that point.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
Hey Mia. Hey Chris.
This is Dave Marshall. Can I jump in here? I've got a couple of questions.
Of course,
absolutely. I'm getting ready to build the frame, and I sent you guys an email. I gather people are using a 12-foot top board to get a little better accuracy at the corners. And I want to know, when they do that 12-foot top board, do they typically make the height of the upright posts larger, or do they leave it the same 79 inches or whatever as in the?
Yes, you will need to increase the distance between the top beam and the wasteboard. You'll also need the 15-foot chains to be able to traverse the lower left and right corners using a 12-foot beam.
So how much do they make it taller?
I think they go up to 25 inches of separation from the top beam to the top of the wasteboard. Now I will say, so Drew on the call, he runs a 10-foot top beam and has really good accuracy in the corners, off of some changes that he did with the chain slack. So that he may be able to talk to that and show you what he has, before you go into a completely new frame design, if you like.
Yeah. So are you using the wall frame, or are you using the M1 frame?
The A-frame, like it looks like I see behind you.
Okay.
It will not be connected to the wall.
Perfect. Yeah, because it's and so I mean, and you have on your top nails up here, you have you're set up. You're not set up down. Before it used to be, say, the old man used to say down here, down low. You have your nails up high, about 4 inches back, 6 inches back. Pulling your chain in.
I haven't started constructing. I'm still in the design stage.
Okay. So you're just wanting to go with the 10-foot top beam, and then
Well,
sorry, I missed part of your concerns there. Sorry.
I kind of have a couple questions. One, I purchased a 12-foot top beam because I was under the impression that made it easier to get accuracy throughout the whole 4x8 work surface. And so I'm trying to decide if I just change the top beam or I change other things. And two,
I would go with, if you're, I'm sorry.
Two, I'm interested in combining it with a panel saw. So the design looks like it lends itself to that. I don't know if others have done that or not, but just use the same frame for a panel saw. But let's talk about the 12-foot top beam and focus on that.
I would definitely, if you're gonna do that, I would definitely go with the longer chains. It's not that much more. I think the chains are $45. Buy the extra length chains and do that to give you a bigger area. Instead of trying to just do a top beam and try to deal with the slack on the chain, all that, I would do that. Then you can go right edge to edge. One thing I do is, so one thing I did in ours, if you can see here, like we have grids. I had a grid that I put on there, so when I'm jigging things, I can easily line it up, see where it's going. Because I cut off the bottom little beams so they don't stick out. So, and I mount the boards on there. But I would definitely, if you're going to go with top beam, then go with the longer chains. And
Did you make your vertical posts any higher, or they're the standard 79-inch or whatever is in the PDF?
You go a little bit higher if you want. That way, I would go. I would look at there's online on Facebook portal, stuff like that, and the forums. You can go a little bit higher, and I would if you're that way, you're getting a little bit more room up here. So I would definitely go a little bit higher.
Okay. All right. Was there other things
Another
that
option
you did? I gather you've got a
you can
10-foot beam.
You can also mount your board. If you don't want to go higher, you want to stick to the exact same frame, you can always drop, since you're going with longer chains anyways, you can always have it to where the bottom board comes down past your wasteboard a bit, and that way the sled kind of comes down. You just don't want to hit the ground. I have mine on casters, so mine's sitting an extra 6 inches off the ground from what they normally are.
Right. Okay.
And then, sorry.
Did you create a lot more support did you put a lot more support in the center of your frame, or do you find that it wobbles? Is that 3/4 inch plywood for your backing board?
Oh no, so yeah, so I'm using 3/4 inch, but what I do for for the wasteboard, I buy some of that like the backer board, the just like really thin 5mm backer board, and I just use some of that double-sided glue and just spray it, stick it on there. That way I can always just peel it later and replace it. And it makes a good way that I can, that way, if you look at my original one,
So Drew, you have a 3/4 plywood, and then you have the backer board on top of that.
yeah, and you can use white shower backer board. The nice thing with the white shower backer board is you can at least use it as a whiteboard too, if you're marking things up. But so like this one, my wasteboard on this one is, oh, beat the hell. In fact, we caught this wasteboard on fire at one point. Whereas these right now, they look nice, and then it's only $12 every time when I want to clean it up and just put it back in there. And that way too, you're going to go through a little bit when you're cutting fully through. You're going to go through a little bit, but you can see it's not. So yeah, I got the 3/4 inch here, and then let's see here, and then so if you go through, it's not too bad.
It looks good.
How do you fasten things onto your backer board? Do you have clamps on the perimeter?
No, I just screw different pieces of wood in just to jig it, depending what we're doing. And so there's some cool ones out there. I thought about doing some other things too. There's some other ways we could have done it, but for this one, it's just easy to do it that way.
And I gather either you don't use 4x8 sheets much, or you didn't find the need to put a skirt on the bottom or the sides?
No, we do. I think and so we've actually most of the stuff we've been doing actually has been 4x8s. But sometimes I will. So if for some reason I'm gonna put, I'll balance it so it can come out a little bit without leaning on. So it depends how I'm doing it. And if in a situation like that, what I'll do sometimes too, if it's a 4x8 that I put it perfectly on there, I'll screw it from the back. So instead of attaching the board on the front, I'll get the board, I'll clamp it, and then I'll put some screws in the back of it to hold it to the back of the board.
Okay, thank you.
And so that way it makes it a little easier. Just make sure you know what spot you're cutting. That way you don't actually. I've hit the screws a few times. It's not good. It's not great for your end mills. But
Yeah, I just ordered a plastic gun with plastic nails. Have you heard of those?
Oh, that's good.
yeah, they're really cool.
Yeah, I know. I just heard of them last week, and I was like, all right. So I ordered that. That way, my router, if it hits a nail, it's supposed to be they're really good too. So you can sand them down and you can paint them.
Yeah, but then you lose all the fun of hitting nails.
Right. Hey, Drew, on the topic of frame build, if you don't mind, real quick, you mentioned the screw, or I'm sorry, the nail. You went up a little bit instead of down.
Yeah, so I think I've changed it too. I think Drew changed this in y'all's documentation. Before it was the nail was, I think it was showing it was like 12 inches out, 12 inches out, and then 1 inch up, and so moved to 6 inches.
So it doesn't get caught.
1 inch down.
Yeah,
So it doesn't get caught.
It doesn't get caught, and it gives it a little bit more tension. Works well. Gives a little bit more range.
And I find some contradicting instructions out there for building. When you measure the top of the wasteboard, are you going to the top of the 10-foot beam, or are you going to like the motors? The motors from end to end. You got to measure that as well. Are you measuring in the middle of that motor or at the end of the sprockets?
It's an imaginary line to the middle of the output shaft of the motor.
Middle of the output shaft of the motor. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Because I was like, I've built 5 of these now, and I do not remember.
Okay.
And I'll tell you this. This one, when I built it, I got it on a square. I've built a couple of, even though I've built, I said 5 of these things now. 5 boards. 3. We have 3 of Maslow's, and I've rebuilt 5 of the frames, and I've stripped the frames a couple times. So it happens.
Okay.
It's part of the fun. The nice thing too, though, is a lot of stuff. You look in the forums. There's people doing all kinds of cool frames. There's metal ones. There's the nice thing with this is they've done it really in a way, especially with a new calibration process. Yeah. It's really cool. You could actually, depending on what you're doing,
I'm on the wall.
Yeah, I've kind of this calibration list is kind of, I did my own half-ass calibrations.
That's right.
But
No,
I'm
no.
not doing formatting on this right now. I'm using this one for testing. So
And if I'm a couple millimeters off from like the dead center of the wasteboard, that's okay, or is that?
Yeah.
well,
So
at the end of the day, it's gonna be fine as long as you're not trying to go exactly out or something like that. You know what I mean? Because you might
Okay.
hit soft limits.
Uh-huh.
So if you put your board dead center that you're cutting, and this is off a couple millimeters, and you need to go edge to edge exactly.
Uh-huh.
The other thing you can always do is, if you know you're off like 3 centimeters, just move the board over.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And then when you go, so if in the Makerverse application, when you perform the edge calibration, it will compensate for that and then get you dialed in to where you're actually properly in the middle. So your initial setup where you're kind of manually setting it in the middle of the wasteboard,
Right.
that's really just to give you a close to accurate starting point.
Mhm.
That way it just minimizes the number of iterations that you need to perform during calibration.
Understood. Yep.
I'm still here. Oh, you can see me.
I know what me personally, what I do, my little trick is I measure my wasteboard dead center, and then I drill a hole, and then I run a bolt through the back of the wasteboard, and I put the bolt, I chuck the bolt in my router, and it just holds the sled there, and then it lets me manually adjust the chains so that I'm set right there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. And so everybody's using easel, huh? That's this
Yeah,
program?
so the reason why we do easel, obviously, this is an open source project. We provide our software for free. We don't want to ever make a customer feel like they have to make an additional software purchase to be able to utilize the machine. So our recommendation for easel is purely because it is a free to use application that doesn't require you to spend additional money after buying your kit. But we have other users that are using like Fusion 360 or VCarve, Aspire. So, but as far as easel is a great tool that it has a pretty intuitive interface. You can upload an SVG, drag everything around, set your cut depths. And then it will allow you to export the G code, and then you'll bring your G code file into the Makerverse application, and that's what actually executes the cut. Another application that we're doing some testing before we actually kind of give it our recommendation is there's a program called Carbide Create, and it is what is distributed with the Shapeoko CNC, and it works really well too. It gives you the ability to do like V-bit tool paths, and it is a offline utility. So it's an application that you actually install on your computer, and you do not have to be connected to the internet. But to use easel, you do, that is a browser-based application, and you would need an active internet connection to create those files.
Okay. Okay.
I'm running easel natively.
They have a download.
No, I'm sorry. No.
Yeah.
It's web-based, right?
Yeah, easel is web-based.
Carbide Create is another good one as well.
Yep.
I was just looking at the chat. Sorry. Someone, Joshua, iPhone 11 there is asking about the Y coordinates are inverted, you know?
Yep.
I kind of have the same issue.
That is usually the first thing to check before you get into any software settings is flip your XY motor cables on the control box, Just
I've done that like 8 times. Yeah, it's usually just flip your cables most likely.
to flip those cables and then they'll go up and down. There is a G-code command that will flip them, but it can cause problems down the road if you ever, you know, put them back or make changes to the machine. So the fastest change is to just take that far left and far right cable out of the control box
Okay.
and then flip them on your connector.
Yep.
And then that will switch the up and down for you.
Whoops. Okay.
Yeah, the issue that we had is, so originally when we created this motor controller, we had the standalone frame and we were mounting it on the back of the standalone frame. So if you're standing behind the frame with
Okay.
this control box mounted, the port on the right goes to the motor on the right as you're standing behind the frame, and the port on the left goes to the motor on the left as you stand behind it. But with the introduction of the wall mount, it now is like left is right and right is left, because you're mounting that box on the wall
Yeah.
as you're facing the machine.
Okay.
And I will say, so Josh, just reading your stuff on the assembly detail, any feedback that you have on any documentation, anything that's unclear. Obviously, we try to update our documentation as well as our web content based on user feedback, because our goal is to iteratively make the machines easier to use. So any feedback that you have on any of the instructions, manuals, videos that you see, feel free to send us an email to either info at I would say info at makermade.com. And then if it's something in the documentation that actually has you stuck to where you cannot progress, then send a message to support at makermade.com, and then that will actually open a trouble ticket. And then Mike, he's on the call here. He's our support guru, and then he'll reach out to you and get everything sorted out.
Okay. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's faster than typing. I just didn't want to interrupt anybody. So yeah, my father-in-law bought one last week, and I was helping him set it up. And so that I'm just trying to think back to some of the issues we ran into, and you know, the up down being backwards. I told them to swap the cables and see if that fixed it. They haven't tried that yet. Those cables are kind of a little brittle, so I didn't want them just to go in there and start yanking stuff. So I'm gonna go back up there this weekend. But yeah, that and the other thing, like some of the other things we ran into, the springs on the top. It's a little unclear exactly how that's supposed to work. You know, there's differing instructions, and the sprockets that are included that are mount on the motors, like which direction those need to be, like whether the sprockets are out from the motor or into the motor. We tried it a couple different ways, and it collided with some of the screws in that area, so we kind of flipped it or whatever. And
Okay.
so we kind of fiddled with it until we got it to work, but it's still kind of unclear whether we did it the right way, that kind of stuff. And I think the problem is that we were trying to pull information from the documentation and YouTube videos, you know, and that kind of stuff, and they don't all match. So I'm sure it changes over time, but we're maybe looking at videos that are, you know, 6 months or a year old or whatever. So, and then the different maker versions, and then the open source version before that, those are all kind of thrown in there. So it's, you know, like I don't know how to fix it, but it's really hard to find the right documentation and ignore everything else. So I think we're mostly through it. We're about to start doing the calibration, which I think will help. But yeah, we're getting the motors set up and moving in the right direction is our next step. But yeah, we'll try swapping the cables next, and that I assume that'll work.
No, that's great feedback, and we'll go through, and I'll make sure that we do a good scrubbing on our YouTube channel to make sure that we don't have any legacy content on there. as well as making sure our links are updated. That's definitely great feedback. And I apologize that it kind of caused you some struggles along the way.
No, that's fine. I mean, it was mostly fine. It was close enough to where you could see, for instance, like when you're mounting the Z frame to the sled, the paper instructions we had like the sled already mounted to the frame already mounted to the sled, but the video we watched didn't. So there were steps in the video that were talking about mounting the frame that were already done on our sled or whatever. So it was just, we were just trying to figure out, between the two of them, what steps we actually needed to do in what order. With those bolts that you have to spin to lock everything in. So some of those were already done and some of them weren't. So that was kind of confusing, but we worked through it.
Hey, Chris, sorry, I'm gonna interrupt. Hey, last night we were talking about the 24,000, 4,000, right? For the S values?
Yeah, 24 and 4. Sorry. Awesome. Yeah. Also, Mia, great comment on the Facebook group. If anyone is on Facebook, we have the MakerMade Owners Group. There's, gosh, I think we're getting close to 4,000 members right now, and there's just a wealth of knowledge on there, and it's searchable. So you can search for any issue that you've had. Also, people put a lot of like tips. There's some file sharing that happens in there as well. But it's a great community if you are a member of Facebook.
I have a question for Drew. I don't know if you can hear it. Well, I was wondering because sometimes I have boards that aren't, I don't have a full 4x8 sheet, but I still want to use it. And I saw that he had drilled the wood to kind of make a place where he could set it. But does anyone have problems with like if it goes, sometimes when it goes down, like it'll like either way, I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say, but like the board, like the sled lifting, like when it goes past where like you're
So if you have, so say you have a 24 by 24 inch piece of birch ply that you want to cut a design into, you would mount that in the middle. But if your design comes pretty close to the edge, if you have any kind of scrap material that is of equal thickness to what you are cutting, you can just kind of like mount that beside it, just to provide a little runoff support for the sled, so that you don't get any wobble and bit deflection when you get to the edge of your cut material.
Yeah, and
I want to cut acrylic, but I have 18 by 36 inch pieces, and it's like hard to find something for that, that thin of a surface. So
absolutely. How thick of it? What are you running? Like 1/8 or 1/16?
I think I have 1/8, and I do have a 1/4 piece that I haven't tried yet, but I was wondering if I could cut or engrave the 1/8 inch piece.
Yeah, you could do 1/8. So the other thing that you can do, and I've done this myself with Lexan, is if I have 1/8 Lexan, I'll go get you can go buy small sheet. They sell like a 24 by 24 or 24 by 48 Luan, which comes in 1/8 inch. And then I just stack the Lexan on top of the Luan, and then it allows me to use 1/4 inch scraps on the side to support the sled. If that makes sense.
Leftover whiteboard pieces, but I guess I just need to build it up a little bit better so it doesn't lift.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of those, this is kind of one of the scenarios with this style of machine where you kind of have to get somewhat creative, because obviously with a suspended gantry machine, you just bring the bit down. Whereas in some of these scenarios, you have to actually bring your cut material up so that you can accommodate it with support materials on the sides. And I understand there's definitely can be frustrating at times, but once you get it set up, it's really easy to create kind of like a jig system to have it create a very repeatable process. And Drew doesn't always follow best practices, so that's just like
So I mentioned it earlier, but I want to ask just to be sure we did it right. So on the sprockets on the motors, the the sprockets themselves, the
Mhm.
teeth are offset, right? So they're
you want gear out. So you'll have a
Yep.
shank in with a grub screw, and then you'll want the gear on the outermost.
Yeah.
Portion.
It was colliding with the screws when we did it the other way, so we assumed. But the video we were looking at, or the picture that we were looking at, one of the two had it like it looked like it was flipped the other way. So maybe keep an eye on that. Maybe you can fix that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions?
Actually, I got one more question while we're here. So if you wanted to control the speed of the movement, so you can, not break anything, what's the best way to do that? Is it in the software where you do your calibration? Do you tell it somewhere only move at a certain speed, or is that something in the?
It'll be in your G code creation, in your cut setup. Now, one thing to know: the machine itself has a firmware limitation of 1,000 millimeters per minute. So if you want to, if you set it to 2,000, it's only going to go 1,000. If you want to go less than 1,000, in your cut settings, that's where you would set what your cut speed is. So if you're using easel, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a cut settings section, and then that's where you can change the speed. One thing I would say, though, as far as cut speed, unless you're getting into like some soft metals like cutting coppers or engraving, light aluminum, foam, I think you want to go a little bit slower, as well as like anything that you would do with like an acrylic or like a drag bit. A lot of your woods, the way that you can offset the speed is by your router RPMs.
Right. Yeah. So we were playing around with that and trying to figure out if it was better to turn up or down the RPMs or try to change the speed of the sled. But I didn't really know if that was something you did in the cutting software or something that was actually embedded in the files. So I didn't know whose job it was to control that speed.
Correct. So sled movement will always be embedded in your G code. And it's also worth noting that once that G code has been created, then the movement speed cannot be changed without editing that G code file or going in and redoing a new G code file with that. We're working to get the software to a point where it can give some speed overrides. But obviously we're trying to keep the training wheels on for some of our users right now. So some of that stuff will require you to actually enter an advanced mode in a newer release of Makerverse. But yep, that's the easiest way to do that for now.
Yeah. So far all we've done is just download pre-made ones and try to get a couple cuts. And we haven't really tried editing any files, but I'm a software guy, so I could probably just edit them by hand, or I can play around with the software. But yeah, it's good to know. Thanks.
Awesome.
If I can jump in, I asked earlier under info at your website whether people have done any panel saws. I found one guy on YouTube, but He just had a very short clip. Do you know if people have put a
I've-
panel saw on this frame?
I've seen one user on the forums that has put a panel saw kind of, it's almost like a panel saw attachment that he uses. So he's not actually using the automated, like the robotics of the machine and the router. He just it's almost like a multi-purpose frame where it can be the frame for his Maslow unit, or it can be a Maslow, not a Maslow, a panel saw. So it's more of like a modular setup. But I don't know of anyone that is doing like an automated panel saw using the router and G code to control it.
Okay, well, I mean, to start with, I'm fine with baby steps, and just using it as a multi-purpose frame would be fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'll see if I can dig up the link to the build that he had. And there was a thread about it on the I think it's maslowcnc.com. They have a forum there. That was just kind of the origination of the project. And there was a guy that did a panel saw. I think he was using like conduit rollers at the top and the bottom.
Yeah, something like that would be fine.
Okay, perfect.
All right. I'll check out now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Casey, you got to show everybody the arm.
That's a badass arm. I saw that. I was like, man.
Yeah, so this is my pivoting dust collection arm. It takes care of all the cables as well. I added these to kind of secure everything around it. But this right here is what I just finished this week. I don't know if you guys can see it. The new dust collection system. I've been printing that and building that for probably the past 3 months, tested it, and it works great. I'm working on putting a light in it right now. So I'll have a switch back here. I can flick on a light and I can see down on the inside. But all the windows and the little panes are removable right here. So if I want to get into it for any reason, I can. But yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, one thing on your light. If you go with a 12 volt DC LED setup, you can actually just power those directly off the control board. That green connector on the end, there is a 12 volt supply and a ground that is constant.
Yeah, I had asked about that earlier, and I think you replied to me on the Facebook page. So what I did was I've already embedded 2 little 12 volt LED lights. It's funny, for like $6, I got a set of 50 of them. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do with 50 of them, but I only need 2. So I put 2 of them in there, and I ordered up a cable that will plug in, or a cable that will plug in up there. And I'll run it down, zip tie it with it, and go right over here to just a little switch. So I'll be able to turn it on and off whenever I'm running, or it'll be nice. I already tested it. I got some photos of it with the light on the inside, and it looks really nice. The light doesn't front you. It looks right at those little LEDs. They're actually directional. So I put them in at a little bit of an angle, and they shine right down just where the bit touches the wood. Perfect.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yep. But I just posted that in the MakerMade store. That I've got 30 or 40 people were asking me when that was going to be done. So I just posted that actually this morning. So the STL files, so I know MakerMade has a 3D printing machine. The STL files are out there now. So everybody
Very
can
cool.
start
Now,
printing their own.
I was curious on your dust collection. Do you have any, does that still give you a decent amount of ring height adjustments for changing like material thickness for cutting?
Yeah, it actually has. It only took off about, say, maybe a quarter of my ring height adjustment, but I never went that thick before. And I don't think the ring heights that you have, right? They're adjustable. I want to say up to almost 4 inches, isn't it?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, the biggest bit you can get today only has a 1 to a 1.5 inch cut depth anyway. So it's way more than you would ever need. You could go up to maybe 1.25 inch cutting depth, like if you were doing some exotic woods, or let's say you were building a cutting board for somebody, you wanted to engrave in the cutting board or something, you could do that. But I know me, I have a rack where I compress and glue tabletops and stuff like that. And anything that's over about 1.25, I can't cut all the way through, even because the bit isn't long enough, right? Even if I lowered it, then when the M2 retracts to move across the unit, it can't retract high enough because the bit's too long. So
Gotcha. So you would need a much taller Z-axis to accommodate like a 2-inch cut head.
yeah, definitely. So I kind of stay away from anything like that. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that do stuff in 2-inch wood, but that's very, very rare.
Nice. Yeah, I think most of the 2-inch cut head stuff that I see is a lot of like the sign shops that are running that like chloroplast or sign foam.
Yep. And in doing that, you need an extended Z axis. So I think, like you said, right now, I think we got maybe a 4 or a 5-inch stroke on that thing.
Yep.
To get up there with you figure a 2-inch bit has to be able to reach all the way through 2-inch material. So that means it's going to be almost a 3-inch long bit with the bit going into the router.
Yep.
That means you'd need probably an 8 to a 10-inch stroke on your Z axis.
Yeah.
Right?
How deep in your clamp is your router right now? Are you sitting pretty tall?
What do you mean?
So like the router itself can be positioned up or down inside the router clamp.
So mine is only about, I want to say it's around a 1/2 inch from the top of my router, but I base that off of, again, the size of board I buy. And then whenever I set all of that up with that new dust collection system, I put 2 3/4 inch boards underneath the deck. And then I put the router with the bit in it, and I let it slide all the way down where it touches a work surface. So that means it's guaranteed that bit will go all the way through 3/4 material. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like for me, it's a simple way to preset. Then I don't have to guess whether or not my router will go through my normal material. And so that's the way I usually do mine.
Awesome. That's a great tip.
Quick, easy setup. And now I'm working on an insert that I can just pull the deck away from, like my work surface.
Mhm.
And I printed some inserts for this dust collection system. I'm seeing if I can put something in one of those inserts, like a flat nail or something, and then insert it to the bottom of it. And then I can put 2 alligator clips on for zeroing out my bit.
Oh, like a Z probe?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're working on a couple different methods to see how we could implement a Z probe. So right now the probe itself is not on the board, but we know that we have a couple. Obviously, there's 2 full banks of are we digital? Let me check. Yeah, we have 2 banks of analog inputs that are unused on the do board itself. So we're looking at a potential firmware update that would allow you to plug, a connector into some of those unused ports on the Arduino itself, and then add a touch probe ability.
Yeah, so my thing is how do I get a touch probe in there, right? Because the board this isn't like you were talking about earlier. This isn't a gantry CNC where you can set a known thickness of material underneath the bit and drop it down where it's exactly 3/1000 of an inch, whatever. So what I'm trying to figure out is, because we have a 5/8 inch thick sled that this whole thing rides on, how can I just basically with one hand take and pull the sled away from the work surface and put an insert into that 3-inch hole, and then go ahead and let it sit back down on my work surface, and then just slowly dial it in until either I get a piezo buzzer or a light that goes off that says, okay, here's where you're at. Then I know from there I can go ahead and pull it out, pull that insert out, and I know that insert's exactly 3 millimeters thick. Then I can just go ahead in my unit in Makerverse, lower it down 3 millimeters and hit home.
So I can tell you what we are looking at and what we are testing, and it may help you somewhat in yours. Is I cut like a teardrop shaped piece of sheet metal, and I have that screwed to the sled just outside of that circle, the middle hole, and then that has a lead attached to it through the screw, and so I can pivot that down to where it covers the top of the hole on the sled, because it's always a known distance. And then so you clip an alligator clip, the other end of the clip you clip onto the bit, and then when you drive down, so we're running like a normally open circuit, and then whenever the bit touches that touch plate, it closes the circuit, and then it just automatically stops the Z-axis movement.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And we're looking at some ways to do it where it's actually in the where you tie into the actual Z-axis connector. So you would unhook your wiring harness from your Z-axis motor, plug this little intermediate connector in, and then plug your harness back into it, and then it would almost run like an interrupter to the motor power. So you just tell it to go down. But what we're trying, the issues that we're running into right now is that when you send it a command of, hey, move 20 millimeters, we need to be able to read directly from the encoder and then capture where it stopped before the power was cut to the motor. So we have a few different things that we're trying. We are also actively in pursuit of adding this feature for everybody. But we're just trying to make sure that we do it in the least invasive manner, so that you're only going to be adding a component to your kit rather than having to buy a completely new shield or something to add that capability. So that's where some of this extra time is coming as from a development perspective, because we want to be cognizant of the purchase that everyone has already made, and find a way to make a plug and play feature that can be added to the existing kit rather than swapping a complete component out.
Yeah. Well, if you guys need any help with beta testing or anything, and I can let you know what I come up with. Like I said, I don't want anything. I guess I'm just a little bit different on that. I don't want anything attached to the board. I've already got enough weight and enough stuff attached to my board, right?
Oh no, absolutely.
So
I've seen some other guys they just have like a piece of sheet metal that they stick behind the sled, and then it runs down and does that same circuit style.
So this right here, I don't know if you can see this very well, but this right here is what I have for my centering tool.
Yeah.
I printed, and this square right here helps me put the dust collection system on it. Centers it perfectly to the 3-inch hole and the router. But I was thinking about taking something like this, and on the back of it, just putting a piece of metal right in here.
Absolutely.
And through this, I could just run a wire out to, whatever you guys were designing too. But I could take this, then lift my board out a little bit, slide it under, let it go into that hole, and then my work surface and my board, my sled would be here, and the whole weight would be pushing that in there, keeping it steady. Then whenever I lower the bit down, it would just touch that piece of metal. But then I could take it out and hang it back up whenever I'm done, and it's not still attached to my board to rattle around or anything like that. That was kind of my thoughts. That's kind of where I'm going with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it would all be easier if we just would have used an SPI driver on the Z, but you know, hindsight and cost, right?
Yeah. Cost being the big one, right? Cost and manufacturability. That's for darn sure.
So that brings up another question. Again, I'm just getting started, so I apologize. So when we did our first couple test cuts with just some files we downloaded, figuring out all the home Z zeroing values, but my first my first attempt was essentially try to zero out everything, get the bit as close as possible to the wood that we were trying to cut, zero everything out, and then run the program, right? So what happens is it lifts the bit, moves to the starting position where it'll start cutting, then moves it down back to where it started at basically zero, and then starts trying to cut. So that's wrong. So I changed it, zeroed it out to where it was just a few steps in to where it actually would cut, which worked. But then at the end, it basically drug a line from wherever it ended back to home, right? So now I've got a cut. So can somebody explain how that's supposed to work? Like which one of those numbers or settings
Yeah.
controls that?
102. So you have Z scaling in the firmware itself.
Okay.
And then there is a calibration widget for the Z axis that will help you kind of dial that in.
Right.
And then so that's where it's not returning back to its safety height at the very end.
Okay.
And that is what would cause that on the machine side. But I've
Okay.
also seen where sometimes the safety heights are not safe enough in the actual G code itself.
Okay.
So I always set so by default, I think the safety height is only like 2 millimeters in easels. I like to set mine to like 5 or 6.
Right,
So
way
that
high.
I know that I am well beyond the bounds of the sled. So some of that is just the learning curve in the G code selection and setup, and then but you will find that there are going to be some changes in your Z scaling, just because of the manufacturing process, depending on at what point of the lead screw that grub screw is in, just the rotations and everything. So there'll just be minute changes. They're pretty dialed in out of the box, but there's always going to be a calibration point to where you're going to calibrate the steps per millimeter on that Z axis to get it to where when you say move 10 millimeters, it's bang on moving 10 millimeters.
Yeah, but it's the job of the G code, the G code in the file to lift the actual bit at the end and return home.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. All right. But if your Z scaling is off by a little bit, it might tell it, hey, lift 5 millimeters, and it lifts 4.6, and then it'll give you that that 0.4 of extra that no one was expecting.
Right. So I mean, so what I was getting was it would do the cut because basically I told it zero was actually like inside the wood, so I could get it to cut. But then when it went home, it just kept cutting the whole time. So when you zero, there's a zero out there's a machine zero and a work zero and another zero. If you zeroed all of those out, is that supposed to be at the surface of the board, the bit?
Yes.
Is that what that's supposed to be?
Yes.
Okay.
So zeroing the Z is the bit should be touching the material that you're wanting to cut.
Right. But not actually cutting because it's not. So is the Z value into the wood or out of the wood? Is it?
So whenever you're telling it to cut, so whenever you say, hey, I want you to cut 5 millimeters deep, that'll actually be a negative Z value that will push it down in. And then so if you have a safety height of +5, that'll be 5 millimeters away from the surface of the cut material. And then for me, the easiest one that I know Casey's got like a light. I like to, sometimes I'll shine a flashlight in there, and that the easiest like rule of thumb for me is when the bit touches the shadow, that
Yeah.
you're zeroed.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other, in the absence of questions, if anybody has anything cool they're working on, or ideas, or just general awesomeness, we like to share some of that too.
I am just messing around for a second, sorry. I'm playing with Lightburn now since we have something, we got that other stuff going.
I haven't cut anything yet, so the anticipation's killing me. But I'm close though. I can feel it. If I were to, the imagination is the limitation really on what you can do for most of it. If I were to do like say a map, if you will, of a walking map in the woods, and I kind of traced out a path and put letters up, and wanted to cut this out and put this piece of board out there in the woods for people to follow or whatever. That's all possible with the M2?
100%. So anytime you want to go with like detailed stuff, like I've done a couple, there's like a big lake near me, and I cut the lake out and had all like the tailwaters and everything. The V-bit is really going to be what shines in doing small lettering, everything. So like you're going to get really crisp corners. You can do any font that you want. You can do really, really tiny stuff. And it's a progressive taper. So the deeper you go with the V-bit, the wider that trench gets. And then you can really do some stuff with your lettering. I think, was it Matt? Were you the one that was doing some V-bit stuff a couple weeks ago?
Yes, I was.
Perfect. Yeah. So Matt might be able to show. I know you did the Yoda, right?
Yeah, let me go grab it.
Okay, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, the Yoda that Matt did is pretty cool.
Nice.
But yeah, and then after that, like I love to use. I know there's many products out there. For me, just kind of the multi-purposes. I buy that Hellman's boat lacquer, and just that's for all my outdoor stuff. I just lather it up with that and call it a day.
Yep, good idea.
So you gotta get it, or I had to get an SVG file. I found this SVG file, and I cut this one with a 60-degree V-bit. This one, I told Easel that I had a 16th inch bit, but I really had a V-bit, and so it kind of made it a little bit wider. And I scaled it up on purpose because I wanted to paint this one.
Okay.
But this one's like a 90-degree V-bit, and it's a little bit wider. I think 90-degree would work just great though too. But yeah, it just went around the line, and the darker the line, the deeper the V-bit went in. You can't do that with easel. You have to tell it it's a bit. So that's what I did here. But with this one,
it's 12 o'clock.
I downloaded some software called FCarve, and it made the G code for me, and then I just printed it off on with Makerverse. So
yeah, that looks real nice, Mike. Can you say that one more time in terms of just, you said you named a couple different softwares and
Sure, yeah. Well, the standard software that MakerMade has, we just use the easel online, right?
Right.
And they have a lot of features, but some of those features are behind a paywall. So if you enable that feature like V carving, they want you to pay for the product, right?
Gotcha.
And I wasn't sure, about this yet, and I was just using an old V-bit, and I wanted to see what would work, but I didn't want to, pay for it at this time. So I just basically told Easel that I was using a regular bit, and I put a V bit in there.
Okay.
And that's what it is. So anyways,
Got it.
but I did a search. I use Linux, so it's hard for me to find CNC software. So I've been looking around, and this F-carve works pretty nice, but it's Windows only. So um, it imported the SVG file. I told it about the bit. I said how wide it was and how deep to go.
Mhm.
And it out for me and did the cutting, on the MakerMade
Okay. It's called S-Carve?
F carve, like F dash carve.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Windows only one. I couldn't find on Linux, but anyway.
Okay.
Yep.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that looks really nice.
Yeah. I didn't notice much a difference between the 90-degree one. So this is 90-degree V-bit, and the 60. I guess the 60 is a little sharper, but it's real crisp and it looks really great. So I
Man.
recommend a 60-degree V-bit if you don't already have one.
Okay. Duly noted. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Drew,
Okay.
I hear your roosters, Drew.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good.
Tell that rooster to.
Yeah,
All good.
it's my guard. It's my guard chicken.
That's funny. Neat.
So has anybody here used BCNC? Okay. Chris, I hate BCNC, by the way.
That's why we didn't use it as a platform for Makerverse.
I'm sure with this right now, like, I play with that file, but all right.
Yeah, I think that answered your question.
Yeah. All those libraries that you have to download to get it to run was the frustrating part for me.
Yep. Well, hey, folks, everybody have a happy Easter. I got to get going. I got some cutting to do and some stuff to do for the family this weekend. So everybody have a good Easter. Have a good one.
Same here. Thanks, Casey. You too. Everybody have a good one.
Bye.
Anybody else have any questions before we get off?
No, thanks for the help.
All right. Well, everyone have a good weekend.
All right.
So it wasn't much help today. I may. Are you gonna be free later, Chris?
Yeah, just give me a call.
All right, cool. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you guys. Thank you.